announcements. Before I do that, I will turn the microphone over to Diane Branley, who will talk a little bit about Greening USA.
Thanks, John. So with apologies for digital challenges, Greening USA is a 501c3 nonprofit and has been since 2004 in Central New York. Educational nonprofit. Not one of us receives a penny for what we do. So if you find that you believe that we offer a valuable service to the community, please consider membership. The membership dollars, donations, sponsorships, it all helps to keep the lights on. And it's really essential that we earn your trust and earn a few dollars from you to help us stay here. So please, and also equally important to dollars is people. We need people. We always need brand new ideas and enthusiasm and energy. So if you have any inclination to join us in any capacity whatsoever, just take on one little piece of the puzzle to help us out with, that would be so much appreciated. So thanks. Over to you, Peter.
Thanks, Diane. Picking up on that, Greening USA, and John mentioned, among the programs that we have are the 12 traits of sustainable communities. And one of those traits deals with housing and the affordability of housing in general. That's come to light a little bit more recently because of the Micron project. We keep hearing from a number of communities that real estate prices are already increasing, which will certainly impact housing affordability in general for all home buyers. But for a long time, the City of Syracuse and the county have had programs, sometimes working in conjunction with state and federal agencies, to support home ownership, particularly in the city, on land or houses that have historically been underutilized or vacant. At the same time, rental options are needed too, that are ongoing and help the neighborhoods become more stable. We have 3 panelists that have agreed to talk about the work that they've been doing for quite a while. Caitlin Wright is the, do I have your title right? Caitlin, the Executive Director of the Greater Syracuse Land Bank. The primary purpose of the Greater Syracuse Land Bank is to return vacant, abandoned, and underutilized tax delinquent properties to productive use in ways that support the community's long-range vision for the future. And I know they've been doing that for quite some time. Our other 2 speakers have had experience working with them. Andrew Lunetta is the Executive Director of A Tiny Home for Good, which is describes itself as a small organization with a mighty mission to end homelessness in Syracuse, New York. And they've already made a good dent in that. Andrew will talk more about that, but they've also moved on to other affordable housing programs as well. Lowell Nemitz is the Chief Construction Officer of Home Headquarters, which is a nonprofit housing and community development organization. This is also certified as a community development financial institution, creating housing opportunities in central and upstate New York. So they've all been quite experienced working with some significant organizations. Before we ask maybe Caitlin to kick it off, Chris, did you have a few words you wanted to say about the role that your company plays in some of the affordable housing things as they relate to energy?
Sure. Thanks, Peter. So yeah, I'm a senior manager at Sustainable Comfort. Sustainable Comfort mainly deals with affordable housing, energy consulting in the affordable housing realm. And I guess I'm here to speak more about the landscape of energy efficiency that our three speakers have to kind of navigate through, depending. Affordable housing tends to be kind of a highly regulated space versus, your market rate, where your market rate does fall on code. State code tends to progress a little slower than state mandates. So I guess just to give a little background on what's happening in the energy efficiency as it pertains to affordable housing. So it's from my experience of doing this over a decade, affordable housing kind of moves first in energy efficiency, but it also manages the new ideas. So New York State and the Affordable Housing Governing Body, HCR, set forth its sustainability design guidelines in 2022. And that is, I guess I could quickly share my screen. That is a document that a 39-page document that really lays out, if you're going to do, not to get too deep, 9% or 4% deal, lays out all the requirements that the state is going to want to see in your project. And it's not only sustainability, there's other components to it, but in 2022, it mandated all electric. And this version is 2023, which has been updated. It does require energy programs. These energy programs are, their performance targets are just ever increasing, and to the benefit of operating costs and whatnot. But these are requiring, for instance, solar ready, for a building to be solar ready, or have a solar ready space if it's a flat roof. EV charging, trying to future proof some of these projects that the state is putting their money into. Yeah, I guess it can be hard to navigate. As you can see, there's quite a few programs within, this document's 39 pages long, and then each one of these programs have a multifaceted level of design requirements to have a successful project. So it is harder and harder to navigate, but hopefully we do hit a plateau, and we stick with one version of something for, I don't know, say like at least a couple of years. And to speak a little bit about outside of New York State, Massachusetts, it's now required to do a HERS rating on any residential property, or most. And then if you're over 12,000 square foot, you have to be passive house certified. So that state's scrambling to kind of, and that's not only affordable housing, but market rate. So just wanted to kind of give an overview of the landscape of.
Perfect.
Thank you.
That's great. That's great. I've been doing some form of affordable housing work since the 1980s in and around Syracuse, and we've always taken the approach. In fact, I see Nita has joined us today. The first passive solar homes in Syracuse I designed for Nita on the north side in the 1980s as affordable housing, with the idea that the people who can least afford high energy bills are those who already have trouble affording housing. So just like maintenance and other things, this is a logical linkage to keep housing affordable to own and operate, not just to buy at the beginning. Okay, why don't we begin then with Caitlin, who can share some of the insights about the depth and breadth of the Syracuse Land Bank, and maybe give us an update on how things are going with your organization.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Caitlin Wright. I'm the Executive Director of the Greater Syracuse Land Bank. We are a public authority created by the city and the county to deal with vacant and abandoned properties. And we kind of are the triage entity. So we get all of the city's tax foreclosures. We also go out and purchase some strategic properties, and we occasionally have properties donated to us. And we can pick a selection of properties from the county auction list each year if we're working with municipalities who are interested in working with the land bank. But the city keeps us the busiest. The vast majority of the inventory that comes to us is in the city of Syracuse. And our biggest challenge is that these properties are all very old. You know, most of the homes in the city of Syracuse were built before 1939, I think is the cutoff year that the US Census tracks back to. So they have lead and they have asbestos and they're not well insulated. And we do a conditions evaluation when we acquire the property. About 40% of the structures that have come to us have turned out to be demolition candidates. They've either had a bad fire or extensive roof leaks that have led to extensive water damage, or foundation problems that are making them, you know, impossible to rehab. So we've done a lot of demolitions. Fortunately, the other 60% are renovation candidates, and we list those for sale. Most of our buyers are just regular folks that live in Syracuse and Onondaga County. Many of them are renovating for the first time, which poses a lot of challenges I'm going to talk about. And then we have some groups like A Tiny Home for Good and Home Headquarters that you're going to hear from, and also Housing Visions and Jubilee Homes that are repeat customers that buy many, many properties from us each year. And it seems like mostly these groups are focused on new construction these days, but they do sometimes rehab existing buildings as well. And we occasionally do some rehabs in-house. Mostly we're the middleman, kind of getting properties into the hands of local responsible people who we've vetted to make sure that they have the skills and the financing to handle the renovation. But occasionally we do renovate ourselves, and we're getting ready to apply for some grant funds to do 4 complete rehabs of single family homes to make them move-in ready. Like I mentioned, many of our buyers are renovating for the first time, and it's not real fun to learn on the job on a house that you're sinking so much of your own money and blood, sweat, and tears into. So we're trying to do more to provide assistance to buyers during that renovation process and kind of act as their renovation coach. But more so, we're trying to get more move-in ready stuff on the market, because this process isn't for everyone, and it can be a real nightmare. You open up walls and find things that you weren't expecting. We've had a lot of buyers complain that contractors they've hired have just kind of walked off the job and taken deposits. So we're trying to kind of serve both needs, providing more move-in ready housing so people don't have to deal with those headaches, or if they opt to do their own renovation, that will kind of help hold their hand along the way. They're running into problems like not knowing which tasks need permits, how to pull permits, how to vet contractors to make sure that they're any good. And so we're offering to help with that sort of thing, because we've seen it before. Something else I was just thinking of with that. We're also offering for them that we're willing to do progress inspections along the way before they issue any progress payments to their contractors, just because we have a construction manager on staff who has some experience. Awesome. And he can say whether it was installed correctly before they pay the contractor. So I'm hoping that some of these extra touches will help make the process a little easier for people.
Yeah, bye.
Can we mute Kevin? So we've sold or we've acquired about 2,500 properties in the past 12 years, and we have sold about 1,300. And a big chunk of those are side lots. So a lot of the properties we get are so small. They were neighborhoods that were developed before many of us had cars, and it was pretty typical to see a 33-foot lot. And these days, it's pretty hard to fit a house on a 33-foot lot. You're going to have to leave at least 4-foot setback on one side, and then you're probably going to want 8 to 12 on the other for a driveway. Most everybody wants off-street parking if they're going to spend the money to build a house. And that doesn't leave you very much space for your house. Fortunately, there are groups like A Tiny Home for Good who can work with these tiny lots, but not everybody wants those tiny lots. So we spend a lot of our time adjusting lot lines and turning sites into shovel-ready sites. I said we do that triage conditions evaluation when property comes in. We apply for a lot of grants for demolition funding, and we spend a lot of time applying to the city for lot line adjustments. And I'll just show you an example here. This is some sites that we worked on assembling for home headquarters, and you can see the red lines kind of overlaying the existing parcel lines and showing what we had to go in to adjust with the City of Syracuse. I think in this location, they're going to build 6 single-family homes right here on this block of South State Street. Does anybody have any questions about the work that the land bank does? I will say that we're typically not asking our buyers to go above and beyond what state building code requires for energy efficiency. We do require that they need to replace windows, mostly because we're concerned about lead paint. But that's about the only thing that we require that goes above and beyond code.
Super, thank you, Caitlin. I think what we'll do is people want to put questions in the chat. We can try and conglomerate them or whatever. Otherwise, we can sort of open it up a little bit after we hear from our other 2 speakers. All right. Well, that's a great insight, great overview as to the nature of things. I've been aware for some time that the City of Syracuse has a, I guess what I would call a surprising number of vacant properties, things that are tax delinquent on their rolls, and then another chunk that are exempt from paying tax by virtue of being not-for-profit or a church or whatever.
It is a surprising concentration in particular neighborhoods. And I should say that the number of vacant buildings in the city has been reduced by 44% since we got started. So we have a long way to go, but we're making progress.
Very good. All right, why don't we move on to Andrew with the Tiny Home for Good. We've heard about houses and land that need people associated with them, and Andrew has been working with people who need housing to be associated with them, and have done actually an exemplary job of making progress in that regard. So Andrew, why don't you fill us in on a Tiny Home for Good?
Yeah, for sure. Happy to. Thanks, Green and USA, for the invite to be here today. I think in my short time talking right now, I'm going to talk for a couple minutes about why we exist, where we came from. I'll talk about what we do, and then a couple minutes about our kind of how we build our houses now, both the new constructions and the rehabs. So I started a Tiny Home for Good back in 2014. Prior to that, I had worked for 8 years at one of the local shelters. And I was just a shelter aide there, which is an incredibly important role. And I feel as if the shelter was doing like really, really life-saving work. Absolutely. I don't want to diminish their work. However, what we did was did everything possible to move the men to a permanent housing. And it really didn't matter what that housing was like. It didn't matter the landlord that we partnered with, didn't matter how many other people were already living in that unit. Our goal was to get people out of that shelter. And the inevitable thing that would happen was that we would send men to something that was within their price range, often with an untenable roommate situation, zero oversight. And in a matter of months, sometimes weeks, they'd be coming back looking for a bed. And this happened over and over and over. Anyone who you talk to in the emergency shelter world will say that this happens over and over. So I started asking the guys at the shelter what they were looking for in a house. And the answer, I think, was profound in its simplicity. It said they wanted their own bed, their own bathroom, and a key that when they locked it, they knew their stuff would still be there when they got back. Again, nothing out of the realm of possible. And I really thought they were describing a tiny home, describing a small space that was their own. So in 2014, we got to work building just that, small homes, and renting them to first men, now women and families coming out of the shelter system. So I'm going to share my screen real quick, just so I can talk a little bit more about what we do. Y'all see that?
Yes, looking good.
Okay, great. And again, when this started in 2014, my goal was to just get the people who I saw in the shelter into housing. And as we've grown and as we've had to apply for more grants and really articulate what we do in kind of more concrete terms, it's quite clear that the three square things that Design for Good does is we're a construction manager, we're a landlord, and we're a care manager. Each of those is incredibly important. I'm just going to touch on each one for a sec, but we, as the construction manager, pull the permits for all of our projects. We have carpenters on staff. We have loyal subcontractors that we've used for all of our projects. And while we are far from the fastest builders in town, the fact that we keep it so in-house has allowed us to maintain an incredible level of affordability in what we put together. So taking out our staff time, we have, since we've started back in 2016, built each unit at $120,000 per unit. Now that is a mix of new construction and rehabs, so we could break those numbers down a little bit more, but it is, I know that's a big number, but when you really look at the landscape of affordable housing, that is quite small compared to what is typically asked of affordable housing developers. So that's the construction management side. We see the project from start to finish. Afterwards, we maintain ownership. So we, identify tenants who would be good fits. And what I mean by that is we are really looking for those who have had a hard time finding housing. Men, women, families that have had a hard time in the kind of standard situations that we've put them in before, that have maybe some external case management that would be helpful, but it's not a requirement, nor is an income a requirement. So they sign a lease, 1-year lease, and rent is based on their income. So if they come in with no income, we do everything possible to try and hook them up with the services that can allow that. We average $420 per month per unit, which is way lower than market rate. But because we're not for profit, because we spend a lot of our other time trying to raise that money, we can ensure affordability for our tenants. And I think that's in a place that's high quality. And that last caveat I put there is why it doesn't happen elsewhere. There's other landlords who might be renting for about $500 per month, but what they're getting is not nearly any quality or anything that people want to be with. And the last and most important piece, and one in my naive thinking when we first started this wouldn't be of utmost essentialness, utmost importance, is our case management component. So we have case management on staff that provides long-term permanent support for our tenants. And I thought at the time that we would be able to kind of work with the existing providers out there that would provide case management for our tenants, but it's super clear that the work that those other case management providers have is well beyond the scope of what any one person should have. So as soon as someone's moved into a house, the level of support and care that our tenants got dropped dramatically. So it was clear that the doctor's appointments fell through the cracks, that any medication, any conflict resolution was just not possible unless we did it. So we now have case management on staff to handle those really important procedures. So those are the three things in a nutshell that we do. I want to talk briefly about first our new construction side and then about the rehab. So Chris, you pulled up that HCR 39-pager list. I've seen that document before. We have never, as an organization, had to follow those procedures, though. We have never had funding that has dictated that we build in that way. But we have tried to build in a way in which saves us money long-term, saves our tenants long-term. So since we started building in 2019, we had built a bunch in 2016, 2017, 2018 that were the pretty standard 2x6 construction, 1/2-inch OSB on the wall, slap some Tyvek on the side, put up fiberglass bats, which is good. Those houses are still there. I'm proud of them. But since 2019, we have really tried to look at, building science as a way that can actually be done at an affordable level. So, we do our best to not have any thermal bridging in any of our houses. We really prioritize insulation. So we're putting R60 up into the attic spaces. I think we're at just under R30 for the walls, which I realize is now going to be code anyway, but we do everything possible to make that happen with our new builds. And then the final thing I want to talk about briefly is the rehabs. Thanks to our ongoing partnership and work with the land bank, we've been able to identify houses that you know, are so far gone. Maybe they are, and we're just silly and try and take them on anyway, but that are at a point where we can put them back together and really get either a family or put them into apartments the way they were supposed to be for individuals facing homelessness. And I look at this because I didn't come into this because of the environmental, because of my like goal to make the world a greener place, but I totally recognize that a rehab of a building is much more environmentally friendly than bringing all the concrete over to build a new home, than stripping and getting all the lumber, whether it's concrete siding, whatever you're using. It's much more environmentally efficient to be rehabbing these units. And also, I think it's really special for the neighborhoods to see houses that have historically been there brought online in a architecturally similar way. So we're in the midst of, I think, a dozen units of rehabs, mostly on the west side of the city right now. And I think it will continue to be a part of our work as we go forward. So I think there is one thing I want to share before I turn it over to Lowell from Home Headquarters. It's that like affordable housing, huge deal, big sticky problem. We are serving a very, very small pie of the affordable housing problem. However, that very small demographic of people we're serving happens to be an extremely costly and also incredibly vulnerable subsect of our population. And I feel strongly that while it isn't a large number, quantity wise, it's an incredibly important number that's not on our streets, that's not in the shelter system anymore. So while our numbers might not be huge, I'm still very proud of what we do every single day, and thankful for the team that I get to work with and for the partnerships that we have with Land Bank and some of the other people on this call as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Andrew. We did have a question pop up. Lindsay Spear is wondering if your renters pay for their own utilities, or does Tiny Home for Good pay it and it's included in the rent?
A Tiny Home for Good covers utilities for the first year, and then when a tenant goes to re-sign the lease, they pick up the utilities. Now, there's some tenants who owe a lot of money to National Grid, and we'll either work with them to get on a payment plan with Grid or up the rent a little bit to cover those utilities.
Great. And obviously the homes that had solar panels on it must help with that a bit. And
certainly, yeah. Thanks to actually Kevin Nichols and NES Energy that's on the call right now. They did our work over at the most recent builds we did. Yeah, they haven't been up and running for too long to really get a sense of it, but it absolutely is going to be a big help.
Perfect. Excellent. All right. Let's move on to Lowell at Home Headquarters, who I know has been quite active around the state, around upstate, for some time, doing a wide variety of things.
Yes, thank you, Peter, and for the opportunity to speak here.
Mm-hmm.
Share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see that. So, hello, everybody. I'm Lowell Nemitz. I'm the Chief Construction Officer at Home Headquarters. Here at Home Headquarters, we are a nonprofit community housing development organization. As Peter mentioned earlier in the call, we are also a certified community development financial institution as well, which means in addition to new construction and major rehab work, we are also a lender. We're able to provide mortgages and home renovation loans to the community as well. Oops. So this here kind of shows the impact of Home Headquarters over the last 27 years that we've been in business. As you can see, these pink dots here kind of represent properties that have been developed, the majority of being in the city of Syracuse, obviously, and those could be a mix of new construction or moderate to major rehabs. The blue dots there are homeowners created. So again, those are properties that we may have redeveloped or also that were bought on the private market that we have provided financing for the homeowner. And then again, we also do a lot of home improvement lending as well. That could range from a conventional home improvement loan to different programs. We work with different organizations to provide. It could be a deferred loan or different grant programs depending on the situation. So one of the things we try to do with new construction and major rehabilitation work Again, working very closely with people like Caitlin and City of Syracuse and things like that. As we try to cluster our approaches, this is an example of a clustered approach on the near west side. The goal there is that, you know, instead of just kind of sporadically placing things, we like to go block by block and street by street. We see that, you know, as homeownership grows in that approach, there's a noticeable impact over time as the properties stay upkept, the neighborhoods stay safer, and the home equity in those areas continues to rise. This is another example of that on these south side of Syracuse, just with our clustered approach. Caitlin mentioned a little earlier about the State Street. We have 6 properties there. We have a bunch more in that area on the south side in upcoming projects, as well as a lot of the new construction and rehab work that we've been doing in those areas for the past 10, 15 years. We work with a lot of different partners, again, some of whom are on this call here. On the funding side, we've worked with NYSERDA and Sustainable Comfort on some projects. I was not directly involved in some of those. I can't speak to some of the details, but we did some passive homes or almost passive with our in-house construction crew, again, working with NYSERDA for some grant money there and with Sustainable Comfort in Chris Valley. We work closely with the City of Syracuse and Onondaga County. Obviously with HCR, the New York State Affordable Housing Corporation. The Allen Family Foundation is a close partner for us and has been for many years. On the design side, again, we work with Sustainable Comfort a lot. We work with CityLink Architecture, whose principal Hillary is, she used to actually work for Home Headquarters, and now she has started her own architecture firm. She lives on the west side of Syracuse. She's, you know, deeply entrenched in the area, and she's a huge asset to our endeavors there. And we have our in-house construction crew, Opportunity Headquarters. They allow us to do about 5 houses a year, new construction in-house, and then we are working with other general contractors to increase our capacity to build new homes and also complete major renovation projects. I've noted some of the close partners we have here on the slide. We work with all of these contractors very closely. These contractors are all MBE state certified, and they're from the Syracuse area. So we've had great success with them. And again, we work closely with the Greater Syracuse Land Bank on the property acquisition side. We get a lot of stuff from auctions, from the NCST organization, and from private listings. And then obviously, there you go. As we continue to, you know, pursue these endeavors, the sustainable technology, green technology is not only becoming more of a mandate, especially for a lot of the funding sources that we do work with, but it is also best practice. So, you know, we are heavily invested in creating the most energy efficient and sustainable home that we can, while also working within our funding sources and the budget guidelines that we have to work within. We are moving to a lot of new wall panel systems where we're putting foam insulation in the walls or continuous insulation on the exterior before you actually put your siding on. We eliminate thermal bridging wherever possible, and we do extensive air sealing so that way these homes can be tight, because again, a lot of these projects, they are mandated now through our funding sources to be all electric. So we are using air sourced heat pumps on the HVAC side. And for an air sourced heat pump to work at its maximum efficiency, you really have to have a very tight building envelope for that to be, you know, as efficient as possible. We are doing solar panels on some of our projects as well. Kevin, again, has worked with us on some projects, and Chris. And as Andrew said before too, we're kind of in the beginning stages of some of those projects. So we're excited to see what the long-term production of those are going to be, but we're very confident that that's going to be a good thing for the homeowner, you know, that product we're providing for them. Now on the building design side, I mean, we take into consideration the orientation, where the sun is going to fall on the building, the insulation of not just the walls, but the windows and doors. Again, working with our partners to make sure that we are modeling energy usage accurately. And then, as Chris mentioned earlier in the call, many of our projects now are requiring some type of, there's a list, a number of different energy certifications that are required. Right now, our new construction homes are all going to be Energy Star certified. And what we try to do is we try to replicate these, that allows us to obviously do things more efficiently and more cost effective. We are working with our general contractors, our vendors, our design team, our suppliers, and then our in-house crews as well to make sure that we continue to get more efficient at things like heat pump installations and the insulation of the buildings. That way we can easily duplicate these things across projects, and the more money we can save and the more effective we can be, that just means that we can apply that to more new construction and rehab work to provide more housing opportunities. So then I'll talk a little bit more about kind of some of the upcoming stuff and how that relates to, affordable housing in the area. Obviously, with all those things that I was just talking about before kind of tied into that. We are working with the Affordable Homeownership Opportunity Program, or the AHOP program. We're going to be building 35 new Energy Star certified single-family homes. We're looking at starting substantial construction on about 15 of these properties within the next 30 days. All of these homes are going to be sold to income qualified first-time home buyers, and they are, again, following that clustered approach. Right now, many of them are on the south side, where we have already had success with that type of an approach. We are nearing completion on 5 homes with Onondaga County. I would say in the next 2 weeks to a month, all of those homes will be complete. We are actually looking at a potential buyer for one already. So that is obviously very exciting. And then in the past, Home Headquarters has been awarded CERTI funds. That's a small rental development initiative, also through HCR. We were able to renovate 14 rental units that we then kept in our portfolio. We have applied for another round of funding to rehabilitate 3 more 2-family homes, also on the south side of Syracuse, with the intent to rehab and then rent. We're working again through with HCR to on the Legacy Cities program, and with that one, we're going to rehabilitate 8 single and 2-family homes. It's a mix of single and 2 families. These homes are going to be sold again to income eligible buyers. These homes are going to be all electric. So going back to some of the other comments before, the new construction, it's a little easier to adopt those tight building techniques. It's a real challenge on some of these older properties. So this one is going to be a fun one, but obviously we have to make these as efficient as possible as well, being all electric with heat pump HVAC systems in there. And then one of the other things that I want to touch on quickly is the Community Development Block Grant Extension Fund. So we applied for the first round. We were allocated $4 million. So we used that money to rehab a multitude of properties and then sell to owner occupants. And then we also demoed some properties to make way for new construction. And we were also able to renovate a 24-unit apartment building on the south side, which is completely renovated now and almost fully occupied. So that was a big success there, again, just to provide more housing opportunities for people that may not otherwise be able to get into something like that. We have been awarded an additional round of funding through that to rehabilitate 4 more 2-family units, which again will be sold to an owner occupant, and then they obviously can rent that second space out to help cover their mortgage or whatever. And we're going to demo 2 more properties. One of them's already down, and again with the intent to build new homes on those lots. So I'm going to stop sharing here. So that's kind of Home Headquarters in a nutshell. Again, I'm very focused on the construction side. So if anybody has any questions, if I'm not able to answer them, I can certainly try in the chat, or my email is up here as well. You can always email me and I can get you to the right person. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Lowell.
Yeah.
Appreciate it very much. A couple of comments, questions have been coming in. And I guess this would apply to any of the 3 panelists here. Paul Welch is wondering about rental payments being converted to mortgage payments. The Syracuse Housing Authority allows that. And he's wondering how many, have you worked with any Syracuse Housing Authority residents who have become homeowners? I guess that would be for any of the 3 of you.
Sure. I'm not an authority on that, but I can say that we do have some properties now through an affiliate organization that we kind of took the reins on couple of years ago, Syracuse Model Neighborhood Corporation, where we've had some long-term tenants, some of them, with SHA, and we are working to sell them homes that they have rented for a long time. I don't know some of the numbers on that. I certainly get them, but yes, that is something that we are doing on our end.
How about Andrew? Do you guys have a program where some of your renters can become homeowners? You need to unmute, Andrew. Okay.
I truly wish that was the case, but when I look at our tenants, when I look at our inventory, I think that rental is probably the best case scenario for our tenants. Most of our tenants have a mental health diagnosis. Some are still dealing with substance abuse disorders, and the likelihood of home ownership is far. We have had the conversation with a couple tenants, but it's just not in our wheelhouse, nor is it our mission.
Sure. Okay, good to know. Good to know there's coverage across all sectors here. How about Caitlin? Do you, when you do the rehab properties, are you involved in purely ownership or rental or both?
We are not trying to proactively get into the business of being a landlord, but some of the properties that come to us through tax foreclosure are occupied at the time of foreclosure. And we do have a policy that those tenants get the first opportunity to buy. And we work with them to, sometimes we'll lease it to them for a year to 18 months while they work on getting mortgage qualified. And we work to piece together a package of loans and grants that'll help them renovate and buy the property.
Perfect. Great. We've also had a question again from Paul Welch. He's asking about density. He's recalling that Cherry Hill and Kennedy Square apartments are now history because of maybe too much density for those programs. McKinney Manor is scheduled to be demolished and replaced by a high-density housing project. Mulberry Square, the forerunner of McKinney Manor, was torn down in part due to its density, he's citing. Can you comment on that? Generally, density in urban areas is seen as a good thing. It's meant to be more sustainable and so forth, but maybe Syracuse isn't quite ready for the level of density that was in these projects. Anyone want to comment on that?
I mean, in my mind, I think density is still a good thing. I don't think the way in which density has been done here, though, is good, particularly when you look at the very similar income demographics of those who were in those projects that Paul was mentioning before. Like, I think density would work here if it was mixed. It's as simple as that. And I think a huge part of why our tenants succeed as a tiny home for good is because we are scattered site throughout the city. The most we have in one location is 6 units, and I wouldn't go one more than that. And for better or for worse, we do have the luxury in our city to spread out, to use vacant land, to use the, while dwindling, but still high number of vacant properties. And I think that should be something that's focused more on, as opposed to really finding these lucrative grants that you can put 50 in one site and try and make it work as best as you can. I think those 50 people definitely need that housing, but I think we got so much land where it could also work. That's just my 2 cents.
Sure.
Yeah, I would second that myself, Andrew.
Yeah, we know that a lot of the state programs in particular are related to other parts of the state, particularly downstate. And so higher density there makes a lot more sense, just because that's what they're used to. And that's what's set up. Okay, we've got a question from John Presbiora asking if you can talk more about the construction costs. The sales prices and the sale revenue get plowed back into the program. So we all know there's cost and then there's price. There are 2 different things, right?
Absolutely. So yes, I can speak a little bit about that. Our construction costs for new construction right now are around the low $200 per square foot. So that's for about a 1,500 to 1,600 square foot single family home. most of these homes, again, the single families and things like that, our estimated costs right now are about $175,000. There are buy down subsidies available. And again, these are some of the things that I can certainly point people in the right direction to get more detailed answers on if I don't have them. But you know, at that 200 plus square foot pricing, obviously that's a little bit more than $175,000. So they're, you know, they are subsidized by the state. And then with those, you know, other buy downs and things like that, that's where we can get to that selling cost. Now, as far as the, you know, sale revenue getting put back into other programs, I mean, for us on our end, what we do is, you know, we try to finance as many of these mortgages as we can. So for us, that helps by allowing us to be able to then, you know, through loan sales and other things, put more money back into our organization to then further fund our endeavors. So I guess the short answer to that would be yes. But as it relates to other entities other than home headquarters, I wouldn't really be able to comment on that.
Right. Yeah, usually not-for-profits, obviously no individual is meant to benefit from the work of a not-for-profit. But the ability to actually generate revenue or put it back in is tough. I've worked with some organizations in the city where they've had loan programs that were intended to do just that. They've loaned the money. As the loans were paid back, they were reinvested into other similar projects, whether rehab or homesteading or whatever. Cost is a tough one these days. Cost is
yeah, it is. And just like we were talking about, you know, with the different requirements for different projects, and, you know, we truly believe in providing the best products that we can. And it's always a balancing act. So.
Yep. Yep. All right. We've got a question for Andrew. John Crispier is wondering, what are the floor plans like in the tiny homes, and presume that the existing ones are all electric as well?
Yeah, they are all electric. Our floor plans have, as we've gotten better and gotten more tenant feedback, evolved. So the first two we built on Rose Ave, each unit was 270 square feet. Super small. You walk into it's an efficiency apartment. So everything's all in one place, really, really small countertop. And we still have two tenants there who are doing really well, but both have expressed that changes had to be made. So since 2019, we have really kind of settled upon a drawing that we like. I can share my screen real briefly, if that would be helpful, just to see it. And it's a one-bedroom apartment at its core. Walk into this is one of our locations over on Marquette Street, which is a super cute street over in the Inner Harbor that we worked with the land bank to acquire back in 2019. And it's a super simple layout where you walk into the living kitchen area. But a huge change is that the bedroom's on the other side of a wall and the bathroom's there as well. I think in our effort to build as affordably as possible, our first dozen units were not as well thought out and well tenant centered as they should have been. And we have since, you know, thought a lot more about our end user, which is probably what any builder or architect does. And we now thankfully have a little bit more funding in order to do that. To John's other point, yeah, these are absolutely all electric. And we only have one home that's gas, and that's a rehab that we did back in the day.
How many square feet are those that you showed?
That's 380.
380 square feet, about the size of an apartment in Manhattan. So it's but quite livable. There's a lot of times it's less about the number of square feet and the layout, and it looks like the layout you put together is very livable.
Yeah, and again, I stress it's for a very specific clientele. It's for a very specific group of people who are really going to take advantage of it. It's not for a family. It's not for a couple. It's for an individual who will likely be there for a long time.
Okay. Very good. We had some questions earlier. I'll just go back to they were for Caitlin. Lindsay was asking about people interested in replacing windows, which the NYSERDA programs only fund in small amounts. you know of any funding sources to help people afford to replace windows? Someone did respond saying that they thought Peace had a program, but there's long waits. And maybe this is like Caitlin start, but maybe others of you would like to comment as well.
There is a long wait time for the Peace weatherization program, but that's another option. A lot of our buyers have applied. The city and the county both have lead abatement programs. So if you have a child under 6 living in the home or who visits frequently and you meet certain income criteria, then they could potentially fund the window replacement.
Okay. Lowell, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we do have a window and door program as well, but those things, they do go pretty quick. I'd have to do some investigation to see, what might be left on that, on our lending side.
Okay. From my own experience, and maybe Chris has experience on this too, it's tough to show that windows will pay for themselves from an energy saving standpoint, just because they can be very pricey to put in, and you know the actual dollars saved when you do the math is, while it's makes a difference, it's not a big number. The windows nonetheless probably have the biggest impact on the way people look at or think about the homes, and their comfort. You know, there's nothing worse than sitting next to a cold, drafty window in the middle of winter in Syracuse. It's, you know,
Yeah, I know the payoff's not there, and I actually come from a historic preservation background, so I've heard that a million times that it's not going to pay for itself in energy savings. But we're looking at it as kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So it's energy savings, and it's also eliminating a lead paint hazard for small children.
exactly right. That's what I was going to say. There's usually a need for another reason to really justify it if you're going to do a replacement. In some cases, the reason is the ones that are there just aren't functional anymore. They you know, and so they just need to be replaced. There was a question about the number of demolitions, and Caitlin, you said about 614 demolitions that you've been involved with.
Yes.
Okay. All right. There's also a question about the average cost of renovating for a rehab for a land bank home. And I see that varies. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that, Caitlin?
Yeah, each of the homes that we list for sale, we clean out all the trash and debris, and our construction manager puts together a scope of work outlining what he thinks it needs to bring it up to code. And we actually attach that scope of work and a cost estimate to each listing so buyers can kind of see what they're getting into. And it ranges pretty widely depending on the condition of the building. So we figure, you know, most of them need at least 80,000, but it could be anywhere from 80 to 200 depending on what shape the building's in, sometimes even more.
Okay, very good. Related to that, how about asbestos abatement? Does that get included in your estimates? Or is that?
No, actually, that is not included in our estimates. We haven't done asbestos surveys on these before we list them.
Yeah. A number of projects I was involved in as an architect with different organizations, I was always a little conflicted about the fact that if the homeowner owned the building and we discovered typically asbestos around the ductwork, you know, in a heating system or something, if the homeowner decided, you know what, I don't want this in my house anymore, that homeowner could go ahead and do whatever they wanted, put it in a paper bag, put it out to the curb, and they were done, right? If, on the other hand, the not-for-profit said, no, we're going to take care of that for you, it was usually a sizable cost, you know, to get someone certified, do the assessment, do the work, and that has to do with the rules, mostly to protect the workers. So both are legal options, just you know, just an option of how to deal with it. So it's a tough one. Asbestos is it's a tough one. All right, there's a question. Erica Herman's asking about electrical upgrades, especially if there's knob and tube electric in the house, and whether or not that makes things difficult for loans. Anyone have want to speak to that, or Erica, would you like to elaborate a little more on your question?
Sure thing. So I am newer to the CNY world, but I come from the Southern Tier Hub. I work under Lindsay Spear. We're coming across more and more complex issues with a lot of knob and tube, either maybe just in the attic or more and more throughout the whole house that's actively being used. And that is holding up limited income projects through the Empower Plus NYSERDA program. And Lynn, I can't speak for Lindsay, but I know that I'm struggling as I'm still learning about partners to find grants and other opportunities to remove that, because it tends to be fairly costly. I am aware of the home headquarters having some special loan options, and I try to assuage fears, but obviously the loan word is like a 4-letter word that scares people. So just wondering that if there's any other opportunities, or yeah, we'll just leave it at that for now.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we don't right now have any specific kind of deferred or grants or anything for that type of an electrical upgrade. I know when we're doing rehab, I mean, we have to bring things up to code when we're doing them. So we run into it on the construction side with the same kind of issues. Is, you know, it can get expensive quick, and we have to, you know, bring it up to code there. But I'm not sure about something for like an Empower or a NYSERDA project. I guess I'd need to know a little bit more about the projects you guys were working on too. And again, you know, I can share my email again, and if anybody wants to reach out to me directly, could always kind of elaborate some more.
Thank you.
Here, I can jump in and explain a couple of things. So I'm Lindsay Spear. I'm the hub director for the Energy Smart CNY, our regional clean energy hub. We're acting as, we've got homeowners from around and renters from around the region contacting us as help them navigate the various incentive programs. Largely, we funnel people into Empower Plus with NYSERDA or Comfort Home. But we're being pointed to more and more as like, we know everything will help braid the resources. So we're trying to find more of those resources to help braid together for people. The thing is that for the homes with knob and tube in the walls, it's making it hard to get homes insulated to the point of the air changes per hour that are needed to get them to heat pumps. So we're trying to find more. There is knob and tube removal funding and electrical panel upgrade funding in Empower Plus now with their new expansion, but it's enough to cover, you know, maybe basement, maybe attic for the knob and tube removal, but certainly not the walls. That's why we're trying to find a little bit extra funding someplace.
I'm wondering how many people simply abandon it in place and then just simply run new wiring.
I mean, that's totally fine. People have live knob and tube in their walls still.
That's true.
What we're finding.
Yes.
And that's where the problem is when we've got that situation.
Yep.
Yeah, and if there's too much in, like, say, an attic, they can't like insulate it all. So then the project just doesn't get done. They don't get any funding for any help.
Yeah, I'd encourage you both maybe to reach out to me directly. We can kind of talk offline and see what might be available on our end.
Yep, well, I'd love to connect more. We've been talking with Aaron Persky over there a bit about reselling retrofits, but I'd love to, love to make more connections with the home headquarters. Thank you.
No, absolutely.
Super. Paul Welch is asking about trees. And by the way, Lowell has just put his his email in the chat. It's simply lowelln@homehq.org. But Paul is asking about trees. Do you want to elaborate on that, Paul? Are you there? All right. Maybe we'll just run it to.
Sorry, took me a second. No, I just is funding available for trees, and I'm just wondering if any of the developers, as they develop, try to, because they're so important to a neighborhood, to a block, to have the shade and everything that comes with it. And are any developers work with tree people and funding to put in trees? And I'm thinking, the inner city areas that have trees, that's a real plus. That's a real plus.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do work with the city arborist and, you know, he's good at finding different grants and programs, where applicable. For a lot of the projects I was describing that myself right now, these are, you know, already lots. Some of them have trees. We certainly don't take trees down unless we absolutely need to put a house in. But I know the organization does work with the city to get funding and do certain things for other projects we've done in the past. We're actually, I don't know, I don't know if this might change yet, but there's a property on Oak Street that we were going to build a mixed-use commercial building on, and the soil conditions are not conducive to that project. So we were exploring some options to maybe create some type of a green space or something like that.
Very good.
I would say likewise to Lowell. It's if there's a tree on site, we're going to do everything possible to save it. In fact, we had delayed actually the project I show you guys on Marquette. It was delayed like 3 months as we were waiting for a variance from zoning to allow us to push the building actually up 2 feet, so we could keep, and it's three and change to save a big magnolia tree. Totally worth it. But Paul, I think just even hearing you talk about the importance of it and making sure it's a priority from the jump of a project is something that a tiny home for good could definitely do better at. I mean, we're so hyper focused on just getting some houses in the ground that unfortunately trees and some of those other landscaping details kind of fall to the back end, at least for an organization of our size. So I appreciate that feedback and might make its way into our next projects.
I'll remember that.
Right on.
Caitlin, how do you guys deal with trees, if at all?
Well, we're on the opposite side of it often.
Right.
You know, we're dealing with abandoned properties where the trees haven't been well maintained and pruned over the years. We've got a lot of issues with trees falling on our properties and off of our properties onto neighbors' fences. So we do a lot of tree removal, unfortunately.
Do you ever replant?
We have provided sites. Atlantic States Legal Foundation got a grant to do some tree planting throughout the city, and they've planted on a bunch of our lots. We have a couple of little pocket parks that we maintain that are that have trees on them. So there are a few kind of green infrastructure examples like that, but not many compared to our inventory of 800 properties.
Sure. Gotcha. Andy Riley is asking, he's worked with the city school district with English as a second language population. Are any materials translated into Spanish or other languages?
All of ours are, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we have all of our sales applications in Spanish.
Gotcha.
Afraid, Andy, we're still quite young and don't have that quite under our belts yet. We do have Spanish speakers on staff for what it's worth, and that has been hugely helpful, but we're not there yet. We should be.
All right, I guess I'd like to ask a question of you guys, sort of a forward-looking question here. What do you see as the your 5-year view, sort of the little longer-term view of what's going to be happening for housing in and around Syracuse, in part because of the anticipated pressure on housing prices due to Micron and other things, or just because it's been the same trend you've seen. I know I was driving around Syracuse with just recently and commenting that, boy, some of the streets I've driven down where I've done renovation projects in the past, it's like some streets, they just don't seem to change, I mean, different houses change, okay, yep, we renovated that one, fixed that one, oh, but this one is deteriorated, that one is not looking as good as it used to. And then other areas are going, wow, this is really nice, this is really turned around, that's when you start to discover that you're not just renovating houses or adding infill houses, you're actually changing neighborhoods, you're actually making a difference, to Lowell's point about targeting blocks and so forth. So some of those things seem to be ongoing. Do you see more of the same, or do you see changes coming in the next 5 years or so? Why don't we start with Caitlin?
Well, we've been really pleased to see property values increase in Syracuse since COVID in a way that we've never seen before. I used to not be able to attract flippers to buy properties on the south side or the west side. They would do kind of the peripheral neighborhoods, but they just couldn't make the numbers work. So our buyers in those neighborhoods were either owner occupants who were spending more than the finished product was worth, and yet still their mortgage was cheaper than rent, or landlords that would hold the properties long term. Since 2020, we've been getting flippers buying in neighborhoods all over the city because the numbers are making sense for them now. It is not making sense for private developers to do new construction yet. So I'm optimistic that if property values continue to rise, that we'll continue to shrink that gap between development costs and the value of the finished product. And hopefully once we're not upside down anymore, we'll see more private people wanting to do new construction in the city. My fear is that this is just going to exacerbate our existing affordable housing crisis. Property values going up is a good thing because we need the market to work. But if we don't start seeing incomes going up in a commensurate way, it's going to get even tighter for people looking for housing.
Yeah, that sums it up very well, Caitlin. We're seeing that obviously too with neighborhoods we've been in for a while. We're clearing out some of the SMNC inventory to private sales. So again, those property values are going up, but it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Andrew, what do you see the future?
I mean, unlike Lowell and Caitlin, I mean, I'm much more narrowly focused in what our mission and scope is. Like, don't get me wrong, I absolutely want to see our city become more affordable, safer, all that really good stuff. But Italian for Good's mission is really to end homelessness. So when I think about 5 years down the line, I hope that we are an organization that can turn stuff around as quickly as Home Headquarters can, or as quickly as Housing Visions can, for the very specific population that we serve. I think that it's a population that is woefully underserved, and with no other organization really focusing too strongly on it, I anticipate it getting worse unless Italian for Good and a couple other providers can get our stuff together. So I don't know. That sounded kind of bleak. I'm excited about it though. The very fact that I get to speak with all y'all just speaks to our getting our word out.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I guess I will say too, just like, I guess I didn't answer that question very well as far as Home Headquarters in the next 5 years. I mean, specific to what we're doing, I think the continued approach, is kind of our goal. We want to begin, and we have begun building our capacity to build more new homes, and so like Caitlin said, hopefully as those gaps kind of continue to close, just makes things easier for everybody. But again, wages need to rise and certain other things need to happen. But that's our focus, is to continue to grow our capacity for especially new home construction.
Okay, very good. And I gather that would be in Syracuse, Buffalo, and Albany, and other places, not just Central New York.
Yeah, potentially. Yes, absolutely. So I guess I should make a point. Right now, our efforts in Albany and Buffalo are more on the lending side and helping to administer different programs in those areas for existing owner occupant grants or deferred loans for major home repairs. There's a great need. I've spent more time in Buffalo since becoming a part of this organization than I have in Albany. But there's also a great need for the same things that Syracuse needs in Buffalo and elsewhere, obviously. But so yeah, we hope to continue to grow our presence and continue to work with other organizations that are already in those areas. There are opportunities to build new, especially in Buffalo, we have a little satellite office now. But the main focus for right now out there is through our lending programs.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I mentioned Micron as potentially having an impact on the housing market. We've got a question wondering if there are any concerns about the Destiny Mall being considered somewhat in jeopardy, and the aquarium project, if those will have any impact on anything that you guys are doing, either helping the market or impeding the land around it, or whatever. Any thoughts? Or do you see it really not an issue?
In my mind, I don't see either of those directly affecting things that we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
Yeah. I
Right.
feel likewise, yeah.
All right, Dick, Kornbluth is talking about rent increases, the supply and demand problem. Do you want to elaborate on that, Dick?
Yeah, the problem with Syracuse having the highest rent increases in the country, I think, is a function of supply and demand, which is, you know, classic capitalist process. And the answer is to increase supply. And all the discussions today that I've heard today, which is actually great. I mean, everything you are all doing is great. I did not hear any conversation about increasing in a significant way multifamily housing in central New York and in Syracuse specifically. And ideally, if possible, it should be really mixed income to sort of break down the sort of ghetto barriers that we have in this city and the redlining. I didn't hear anybody address that. I mean, the subject of this whole meeting was housing, and most of it was around single family housing and new construction, but not about multifamily housing. So I'd like to have that, you know, if anybody wants to comment on that, that would be great.
So the vast majority of land in the city of Syracuse is still zoned for 1 and 2 family homes, even after rezone. So that's mostly what we deal with, just because that's most of the parcels that come to us. But when we have the opportunity to build multifamily, when we get a multifamily zoned parcel, we definitely want to pursue that. We're under contract with La Liga right now for 4 sites on Delaware Street and 1 on the corner of Geddes and Seymour, where they're planning to build multifamily housing, about 56 units total, I think. Now that is not going to be mixed income. The challenge in New York State is that I don't think HCR really gives us the tools we need to build mixed income multi-unit buildings. Like I said, our market is upside down right now. I don't see anybody building new apartment buildings that aren't going for, you know, high-end luxury prices.
Right.
Without subsidy, right? So the state will subsidize low-income units, but they won't subsidize middle-income units. But those units can't be built without some sort of subsidy. So I know the city is looking to start their housing trust fund now, and I hope that some of that innovative funding will make it possible to do true mixed-income housing. And Onondaga County has their OCHIP program, which is only $5,000 per unit, but it's something. And for those big buildings, it does make a difference. We need to figure out more ways until we get our market not underwater anymore. We need to figure out ways to subsidize that middle income housing. We also recently sold maybe a couple dozen properties to Housing Visions, where they're building about 60 new units, but most of those are in a scattered collection of 2 family homes and then 1 22-unit building on West Onondaga Street.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Dick. I mean, again, you know, a lot of our focus right now is the single family, 2-family construction. We did just are in the process of closing a sale with a developer and a general contractor we work with for 2, I think they're both 18-unit buildings on MLK, and he's using OCHIP funds to help, you know, rehab that property. So, you know, like Kayla said, it's kind of a small start to that. I know a couple of other organizations, I've heard some, you know, kind of rumors that they might try to pursue some of that mixed income multifamily housing as well, but I don't really know the details on it too well.
Okay. Yeah, I think, Caitlin, you make a good point about the legacy of zoning in Syracuse. You know, the land is already owned and cut up the way it is, and short of having parcels together that can be rezoned into larger, which I know Home Headquarters has done some of in the past. It's hard to put enough land together to consider multi-zoning or multifamily without a zoning change. Even with the rezoning efforts. I guess a related question is whether or not that could change. Could that be impacted, you know, by the aquarium in the Inner Harbor? Would that help kickstart the program? Or are there other things like the Syracuse 2040 Comprehensive Initiative. Abdul Alamin is asking about that. Are there things afoot that might, I don't know, encourage more multifamily that you're seeing?
I think he's referring to the city's 2040 comprehensive plan, and that is still officially their comprehensive plan on record. That called for the rezone project, which they got around to finishing maybe 10 years after the plan was adopted. And I don't know about the aquarium having a significant impact on housing starts in the Inner Harbor, but that is one area where folks are trying really hard to build multi-unit housing. It is difficult because of the market being kind of underwater, like I said, but many of those are higher end luxury buildings they're shooting for.
Right.
Yeah, good points.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, we're just about out of time. Why don't I turn it back to John for any closing comments or remarks or any other final questions? I want to thank our panelists for sure. I think this
Yep.
has been enlightening and intriguing. Thanks for everybody for all the good questions. But John, why don't I turn it back over to you for now?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. And I just will ditto what you said to our panelists. Thank you very much. It was a tremendous conversation. And for your moderation, Peter, good job. And the questions were very good. And yeah, there's a lot more to discuss in terms of where this whole housing situation is going as the community develops in face of the economic development project that we're going to see here. And so, yeah, I think there will be opportunities for additional discussions like this on some of those other issues about, how we go forward with creating the housing supply that's going to be necessary to keep those costs down and allow people to continue to live here, given their income levels. So thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing you in the coming months for future. And don't forget to keep Greening USA in your thoughts when you're dealing with your requests for funding, requests for membership. Any little contribution will definitely help us, as Diane said earlier, to pay those bills and keep the program going and creating this type of workshop discussion to educate the community on what our pending needs are, and also to celebrate your successes that that you're bringing to the community. So thank you all very much. We'll see you another time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy.